Hi everyone, my name's Tashi Dorjee, a startup enthusiast, newly dubbed father, and the head of Flex for Australasia at JLL. Today I'm going to be your host for the Unpacking of APAC mini-series. It's an exclusive series at This Week in Coworking, where we're essentially going to look at what makes Australia tick from a future of work, office, and a co-working perspective. Now, a quick word from our sponsors before we get started. Office R&D Flex. It's the ultimate platform that helps co-working and flex spaces streamline operations, wow their members, and grow faster. Learn more at officernd.com/flex. Syncaroo. Now, Syncaroo keeps your best people unblocked through managed integrations, profit-protecting automations, and understandable tech guidance. Hop in and learn more at syncaroo.com. Ascensus. Ascensus is a global provider of software and technology for commercial real estate, helping the world's leading landlords and flex workspace operators deliver seamless digital experiences. Head over to ascensus.tech and let them know we sent you. Okay, on this episode, we're going to be jumping into the psyche of a human resources expert. We'll be speaking to Natalie Hong, who is a former startup founder and experienced executive turned strategic HR leader, now leading consulting and strategy at HumanX HR. With a background in building businesses from the ground up, particularly in hospitality and tech, and a passion for transforming workplaces and culture from the inside out, she brings a founder's mindset and a people-first lens to the future of work. Really nice to talk to you, Nat. Thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me. This is going to be fun.
Basically, I think it's really fascinating to look at things not just in terms of desks and offices, but from an employer and an employee psyche angle. Do you just want to kick this off by kind of explaining to us broadly what you're seeing, and then we can kind of narrow down as we talk?
Yeah, totally. So it's such an interesting dynamic between employers and employees, and everybody wants what they want, and we need to find the right middle ground or combination of things that makes the employer happy and the employee happy, and that's kind of the whole point of my job, is to make sure that those two things happen. HR get a bit of a bad rap because traditionally we've been considered a bit of an administrative function or a recruitment function or a bit of a mix of both. But the reality of HR is that, we are responsible for an organization's biggest, most important, most expensive asset, and that is the people. And so, we need to continue to help to drive and curate a culture and an environment that people want to be a part of. And so, it's really, really key that we can explore lots of different ways to support that. But one of the most important elements of being able to do that is the actual physical space and the environment that people work in. The interesting challenge that we're seeing at the moment, and this has all come out of, I guess, a post-COVID world, is that pre-COVID nobody worked from home, or it was very rare that people worked from home, and now, because that's happened, we've learnt a few things. It's possible to work from home. It's possible to be productive when you work from home, and you don't necessarily need to be in the office to do the work that you are required to do. So employers have put themselves in a position now where they've had to accommodate that, and now they want to know where to go next. And employees have this huge requirement. It's so valuable to them to be able to work from home, or work not even from home, in a hybrid environment. So it's a combination of office, home, and wherever else they feel comfortable to do what they need to do. And so, there's certain people that can't work from home. Can't be a barista and work from home. But a lot of knowledge workers, anyone that would typically work in an office, are now sort of demanding this as part of their conditions of employment. And employers need to figure out how to make that work for them, in a way that allows still connection and collaboration and all these other things that are really important. And then, have those people feel like they're trusted and they're, able to do the work that they've been hired to do.
Yeah, because I think that's really interesting, because from a landlord and office perspective, we're seeing a lot of landlords partnering or working with employers to figure out how to get people back into the office, because obviously for the first time there's this dynamic where landlords actually care about the experience of the individual walking into their building, because if they don't right now, it frankly means that that company would not take a lease for their building, where the valuation equation, I guess, the formula for them is heavily pinned to. And even over the last 5 years, I've been involved in a lot of deals where we've done things as an owner, where we've designed and built stuff that we think employers want for their employees, whether it's collaborative spaces, event spaces, third spaces, and then frankly, they don't get used. So it's kind of like, oh, do we care they don't get used? From a landlord's perspective, not really, because if it means they sign their long-term lease, it served its purpose. And then there's this kind of gray area where there's no effort to actually, get that utilized from the tenants who said they wanted to use it, but don't actually use it. So I actually think there's a missing piece of the puzzle where there isn't this, I guess, cross-pollination or collaboration between landlord, employee, and operator or giver of these spaces, because to your point, the connection and the connectivity and the whatever it is, we're guessing what it is, or we're asking these very open-ended general questions like, would you use a meeting space? Would you use an event space? What do you use the space for? Collaboration, tick, tick, tick. These frankly very generic surveys that circulate the commercial real estate industry. And then everyone's like, cool, they want this, we build it. So it would be really awesome if you could share, and maybe you can't name names of the companies, but some examples of, because you actually are ingrained into their culture, what they're asking for, what's actually working, or what you think's important.
Yeah, absolutely. So it really depends on the company. So, there's not a one size fits all kind of solution in terms of space that landlords can provide and that they can design and create, because different companies, like you said, have different culture, right? So they work in different ways. You might have a marketing agency, and then you've got an accounting firm, and they're definitely not going to work the same way. So it's really important that is the context in which you're having conversations with those types of employers and what they want. But I think as a point around that for employers, and I don't think a lot of employers really think about this. They're just, it's very black and white at the moment. It's work from home or work from the office, and that's kind of the be all and the end all. But they really need to collaborate with their HR team or their HR human. They're usually, a bit of a standalone role, to work out a strategy, a flexibility strategy that, is equitable for everyone. It's competitive. So, you're getting great people in your organization, but it's also aligned with their business goals. So that way, then the space makes a lot of sense for them, right? To have people in that space. I think what we're seeing at the moment is, this 50-50 kind of split between office and home, and that's not always the best way to do that. Because a lot of people are kind of missing each other. So people are taking different days and different times, and it's not really allowing for that collaborative space or that connective space. So ARI, which is the Australian HR Institute, did a bit of research when we all started moving into this world of hybrid working, and did a big survey of a broad spectrum of employees across Australia. And what came out of that was a statistic that said that 78% of employees want to work in a hybrid work environment. And that's great. That's a lovely statistic. But what they also did as part of that survey was then dig a little bit deeper into that. And what they found was that people recognized that hybrid work environment needed to be, well, they wanted that to be more than just working from home and working from an office. They were very open to the idea of having multiple locations to work from, depending on the type of work they needed to do or the people that they needed to work with. So going to where a space where they could do their best work. And the other part of that was that they recognized that being in person together, being in a place and a space where they could work with others, meant that created a whole bunch of other benefits as well. So, ability to build their capabilities and skills, their ability to learn and absorb knowledge from other people, and also how that then allowed them to grow in their careers. So being able to move into different departments and different roles and sort of promotions so that they could, do more than just be in the role that they're in. So there's a huge acknowledgement from the workforce in Australia that hybrid work needs to be different in order for them to continue to build and grow their careers as well.
Yeah. So from a HR angle, because, in your role, you get to work on behalf of lots of companies that don't have a verbose team or need a specialist in. How do you help facilitate that? Because frankly, the last, I'd say, 10 projects I've worked on where we've helped engineer the workspace for a major tenant within a landlord space or a co-working space have never spoken to a human resources individual. It's always been a chief property officer, a chief commercial officer, because every commercial officer now, gives a toot about property because it's a cost. And if they can cut it down using COVID and future of work as an excuse, they will. But not to go down that rabbit hole like Alice in Wonderland. But yeah, so like, what do you reckon you could do aside from simply designing a space or telling them to go work from a plethora of third spaces kind of scattered around suburbs or whatnot? What could happen? Because I feel like there's never really an HR voice at the table, and this is a good opportunity to hear from you about it.
No, absolutely. So I think that's the first point, is have HR sitting at the table, right? Because they are the people who are most connected to the people you're trying to create this space for. So they're having conversations all the time about what people like, what they don't like, what they want, what they don't want. They've got so much data and so much information, and most of it is just from random conversations. It's not that they've gone digging for all of that information, which means it's more legitimate insight, right? Because it's being given freely to these HR people. So they know lots of stuff. And if you're asking them good questions, then they're going to be able to give you a lot of insight into what works and what doesn't. What's important is the way that people work in your organization. So that's really key to the space. So if you have lots of consulting and projects and all those types of things, you're going to need those types of spaces where you can all get in a room together and whiteboard something out together, where you can actually get all the brains together in the room, where you can have those moments where, you're not on a video call off, in space while someone else is talking. You're in the room with them. There's energy. There's all those things that you can kind of think and talk through and ideate together. So it really is consideration of how you work and the type of work you do to be able to figure out what kind of spaces you need and how many of those spaces. There was a really interesting study, some research done by the University of Sydney looking into productivity in terms of hybrid work. And one of the really interesting concepts that they came up with was something called the productivity paradox. And that essentially was looking at people working from home as part of that hybrid working arrangement, and making observations about what that looked like for the organization, but also the employee. So overall, it was determined that productivity had increased when we looked at incorporating working from home or hybrid work. So there was lots of outcomes being met and lots of goals that were being achieved by the organization, but there was a bit of a disadvantage for an employee because they were actually working longer hours. And it meant that the time that they would spend commuting to the office or doing things in between home and the office, they were pouring into work. And it was sort of having a bit of a negative impact on their overall sort of well-being. It meant that there was a higher potential for burnout. And that, that's not necessarily a good thing, or not necessarily creating sustainable long-term productivity.
No one wants to burn out.
Right? Working from home means you burn out. That's so bizarre. The other point that came, big point that came out of this research from USyd was this inequality in work experiences for employees. So depending on where you were at in your career or a stage of your career meant that you would have a different kind of experience in working from home. So essentially made a bit of a an observation that more senior people, so people who had time to establish their careers and their working habits, sort of thrived in a home working environment. And those that were in early stages of their career or sort of building into their careers found it more difficult to work from home, and they weren't as focused or productive, and that they were sort of at a bit of a disadvantage because of that, and that they would do better being in an in-person, in-office work environment. And that's something that's sort of come out of that study as well. I guess the point of referencing these research papers and studies and statistics is not to be a stat genius or spit stat facts to make things sound cool, but it's really that there is, from that information, there's something for us to solve, and that is that, landlords and operators and employers and organizations really need to be having conversations about how we solve those things, that information that's coming out of that research. There's things for us to solve, and what seems sort of glaringly obvious for all of us is that we need to create spaces and places and work environments where all of these things can happen. And that really is a big shout to being able to evolve and elevate these working spaces so that we can continue in a new version of how we work, or support what the future of work will look like.
Yeah, I think how that is so important, because there's two things that I observe, even when whether it's a flex third space that we deliver or even within a tenancy. The first is, without a human resources person involved in a lot of these conversations where sometimes a $20-30 million third space is being built for a premium asset, it's as simple and as mundane as, we'll do a survey to all the tenants in the building, and within their own tenancy, they're all using 4 to 6 person meeting rooms, right? So we don't need to put that in the third space, but they're not using the 12 to 16p boardrooms as much. So we'll put that in the third space, because then we can have them not put it in their tenancy and they can take that space back and use it, which makes sense, but it also doesn't, because wouldn't you want to put in more spaces of the highly utilized size meeting rooms? It's like, there's sometimes I'm like, yeah, it makes sense. Okay, they're using it, so they don't need more. But hang on, if they're using the crap out of those rooms, don't we need more of them? And then the second thing is that, to what you said really resonates with me, like how people work. There's an element of accessibility and convenience. So if you're in your own tenancy and you remove a bunch of those spaces and you put it into a third space, I feel like you lose the sexiness and the spark of spontaneity. You don't have to book a space and go downstairs and use it. You can walk into a meeting room and whiteboard it immediately, like be like, boom, oh, you get the, like, that's how I work. I get flares of creativity. And if there's obstacles or friction points to do that, it'll fizzle out. Oh, I got to book this. And I get it. A lot of that's seamless. But then that's also the advantage of living within a third space in theory, in a flexible workspace or a co-working space, or having employees distributed and using them. They have all of those amenities in it. So there's this weird dichotomy happening where a lot of those spaces are being removed from tenancies when they lease a new space, because they want to re-engineer it, because they're like, oh, we can book these in the third. But I would also argue, even though it's a double-edged comment, because it's counterintuitive for third spaces that I operate, I feel like we're going to lose a lot of spontaneity and innovation and creative thinking, because there's another thing blocking you from doing that, physically not within your own tenancy.
You're also ignoring human behavior, right?
Yeah.
So you're saying, you do this thing over here, but we won't give you the opportunity to do it over here. And we know we build habits, right? We go to places and we go to spaces and we do things because that's how we normally do them. Yeah. So if we take that away from people, they don't know how to use the space. They don't want to use the space.
People think we're thinking about this too square meterage NLA driven, which makes sense, because, that's what makes the world go round. And majority of the time it's a fiscal and a financial decision. Like, some of the coolest shit that I've worked on has been punted because it made more sense to do something else because the cost was too high. Even though I think the ROI was extremely high from a long-term perspective, but we still think very short-term, unfortunately, in CRE, I think sometimes. But the human behavior angle, I think, is just completely it's being thrown around as a buzzword and in white papers and reports, but it's not really being explored because it complicates everything, because human behavior is hard to pinpoint, because also no one's talking to the HR people who are doing it.
Observing the human
Yeah,
behavior,
yeah.
who have much better understanding of how people work and where they work and when they work.
So what's a good example of, I don't know, like maybe one of the firms that you work with is an accounting firm or a creative firm or whatever. How do you help facilitate that style of human behavior if they within their office space, or if they're looking at co-working or, you know, multiple spaces to have access to?
Yeah, I guess it's really about, I think you made a point earlier around like that convenience idea, right? So sometimes the best way to look at additional spaces and places for people to be working is to look at where your people are. So again, it comes down to that behavior. Where do they move? Where do they commute? All of those types of things. So having a space somewhere that's not home and it's not office, but it's a nice middle ground, is a way to encourage them to work somewhere else. It's also about putting in moments in time, events, meetings, all these things that encourage that collaboration and that connection. So you need to think about, you know, almost like what your business goals are, to be able to then help drive where certain things happen and to be able to kind of achieve those outcomes. So, you know, having regular meetings, you know, and everyone knows what day or what time or what place it's at is really important. Thinking about what you're trying to achieve also means that you can find a space that helps foster that. So if you are trying to be creative, having a place where you don't get natural light or fresh air, or, you know, you can't see green and sky and all those types of things is not going to be able, you know, give people the ability to be creative and to ideate things. So, you know, if you're an accountant, it's maybe not so important, but there'll certainly be times where they need to be creative about solutions for their clients, or where are they going with their business and strategy and all those types of things. So it's you need to create these moments in time to then find the space to facilitate those things or connect the action with the space.
And where does that responsibility lie? Because if I put my flex operator hat on, they are responsible for the experience and the hospitality within the realm of their space. This almost sounds like there needs to be some form of effort or resource allocated to, if you have a distributed workspace, workforce across multiple spaces, or you're not exactly sure where they're going to work from, that's where it becomes a bit tricky to plan some form of appreciation or surprise, or to do that for that particular. Because right now the dynamic is, okay, the answer to that kind of, oh, you want access to a lot of spaces, an operator will just try and throw together day pass packages and slog them to corporates or teams, right? But that's all well and good, but I feel like that's going to fail in the medium to long term, because yes, it offers someone the ability to drop in and work somewhere, but it's missing that form of connectivity with the other employees. But that's not on the co-working operator to facilitate, because they don't know where they're going to go for that day, or even if they all end up coming to their day on that point in time by chance, unless there's some form of communication happening, they're none the wiser, right? So as an employer, you know, and I think we were talking about this offline earlier, how cool would it be if you knew, even though everyone had flexibility, that a bunch of your team all went to the same space to work one Thursday or Friday, and you were able to do something for them?
Yeah, absolutely. Like if there is a way that we can facilitate more insight into what employees are doing and how they're moving and where they're going and all those types of things. It's not a big brother situation. It's not a lack of trust, because that's a really important thing to have in a business, is that you have trust with your employees, and that then fosters loyalty in return. But you want to be able to create a better work environment and experience for them. So, you know, imagine that you have someone who, you know, works from home more often because they've got family obligations and other things that they, you know, it takes up more of their time, and they have that flexibility to do that, but they do decide to go into one of those spaces on the off chance that they're having a great day, you know, and they can do that. Imagine if you knew they were there and you knew that there was a new restaurant that had opened down the road, and you could, you know, send them a voucher and say, hey, so glad to see you in the space today. This is on us. Go grab lunch. Like, there's this surprise and delight and this reward and recognition that goes beyond what we know it to be, because it's pretty flat as it is. And so being able to like optimize and personalize and humanize that changes how you participate at work.
That sounds super cool and exciting, because everyone's flogging the word hospitality in commercial real estate, whether you're a flex operator, whether you're a landlord, because it's easy to say. And the way that translates a lot of the time I see is huge promises that are empty, right? Hospitality for a lot means I'm going to do my best to smile and remember your name with a very low tenure style employee within that business, so meaning they may only stick around a year or two, so you don't get that stickiness and that muscle memory. And then we'll chuck in a barista, right, who will do their best to remember your name. I mean, I don't think that's hospitality. I think that's the bare minimum of concierge and food and beverage services. If you actually want hospitality, it's the things that you're talking about. It's surprise and delight. How can you go extra for your employees? It's like that TV show, The Bear. You know how we watch The Bear? How, what's his name? Richie, the guy?
The cousin?
The cousin. How towards the end of the season, the way he becomes a really good server is he keeps pushing, no, it's their birthday. No, they're in town. They missed out the pizza. But they're coming to this fine restaurant, so we're going to go get the pizza and then create this fine dish out of the pizza. That's hospitality. And I think that's what we're forgetting, because it's too difficult to facilitate unless there's some form of extra element or extra thing that's injected into it. And it reminds me of like a story that I was told a while ago by a hotel operator. Like back before there was computers and everything, a Hilton, the way that they would try and surprise and delight people is they'd go through your trash, which sounds gross, after you'd stay with them. And if they'd find an apple core in there, the next time you say, they'd write down, they'd leave an apple on your pillow. And that's kind of like the staple and the foundation where hotel hospitality is kind of built off. So I think that's an incredible point in like a gap right now in the industry.
It's so important, because it all, that experience that you had at work all comes back to this retention conversation as well, right? People stay because they're trusted, they're valued, that you're rewarded with loyalty when you create a really wonderful work experience and work environment. And that is one of the ways that you can elevate that, because also you can't rely on, one manager might have 30 people reporting to them. They can't remember every tiny little thing about everything. So if there's ways that we can prompt those moments, because, managers, employers, they want to be generous, they want to be thoughtful, they want to do all those things, but they also have a full-time job where they do a lot of things as well. Having something that can help facilitate that, and if that is working in a co-working space where there can be that conversation or that acknowledgement or reminder to be able to do those things for people, that creates such an amazing way to attract and retain.
So I think we'll end it there, because that's actually a really good pondering point to leave on for a lot of the operators out there or landlords. How can you facilitate or address that gap, that surprise and delight, and move beyond just hospitality from a square meterage or a space perspective, and speak to HR. I think everyone should start speaking to HR.
Please.
So thank you so much, Natalie, for your time, and hope that was helpful for everyone. And any last words or?
No, I think that was great.
Is it? Yeah. Okay. All right. Bye, everyone.